Ballistics in due process governs three things. 1. Each weapon's penetration power. 2. Object thicknesses. And 3. Weapon damage reduction. Okay, weapon penetration as fast as possible. Weapons fit into three categories of penetration: low, medium, and high penetration, and yes, the NAC-11 does fit into the highest level of penetration. Why, you might ask? That's why. Every object in the game has a corresponding thickness, so objects will be either none, thin, thick, very thick, or ballistic. These penetration values actually have a number that's hidden from the player. Those values are 0 for none, 2 for thin, 5 for thick, 10 for very thick, and 50 for ballistic. So each weapon also has its own energy value, and that energy value determines what surfaces it can penetrate and how many. Weapon energy values are also pretty consistent now. Shotguns have an energy value of 4, pistol caliber submachine guns with the exception of the NAC-11 have an energy value of 5, thick penetration weapons with intermediate calibers all have a penetration value of 10, and the very thick penetration weapons in the high category all have a pen value of 15. As long as your weapon's energy value is higher than the total object thickness value of the things you're penetrating, you will punch through and will deal damage to players on the other side. Weapons that penetrate very thick surfaces are all in the high category of penetration. These weapons all have 15 energy. 15 is more than 10, therefore they can punch through very thick surfaces. The default wall thickness in the game is actually very thick. That's why on C-Store, Factory, and the new Bank tile set, you cannot penetrate the walls unless you have an F1 Lagros, Mop Saber, or NAC. The other two tile sets that are presently in the game are exceptions to this rule. On Kill House, all of the walls are thin except for the room called Brick House. On Dome, all of the walls are ballistic and can't be penetrated with any weapon. So weapon penetration is entirely additive. If you go to a tile set where you can find a bunch of objects in a row that can be penetrated, like on Kill House, and you have a high enough penetration value, you can actually shoot through a good chunk of the map. You can pretty easily demonstrate this in the training area by shooting open a bunch of the doors. Most green doors in the game have an object thickness of thin. Just close the freezer door and the teller's door. Freezer doors are very thick and the teller's door is ballistic. Once you have a bunch of these green doors open, you can shoot through a series of them with different weapons to see how many thin objects you can penetrate with that weapon. But like I said, it's not determined by the weapon, it's determined by that weapon's penetration power. So if you know the weapon's penetration power, you just do some simple addition. If I shoot through 2 green doors, that's 2 plus 2, which is 4. I need a weapon penetration value of more than 4. So a shotgun will not go through 2 doors, but a gat would. From there, you can start to mix and match. If you open up the freezer door and another green door, that's 10 plus 2, which is 12. If you have a very thick weapon, you can still go through that. Where this gets complicated is actually not in weapon penetration, but it's in weapon damage reduction. So damage reduction is actually extremely simplified in due process. Limbs have their own multiplier. When you shoot at someone's limb, your weapon's base damage is multiplied by that value. These multipliers are entirely determined by that specific weapon. These limb multipliers have no relation to weapon penetration and act on their own, but sometimes with certain guns, shooting through certain walls or through certain numbers of objects, your damage suddenly halves. I want to explain how that works. If your weapon does not maintain 70% of its weapon penetration energy as it passes through objects, it will then deal half damage. That means an F1 Lagros on C-Store is 15 minus 10. We have 5 energy left over. 5 is not 70% of 15, and therefore we deal half damage. Another oddity, and this is great for the game, is that you cannot headshot through walls if your weapon's damage is lowered. That means that the moment your weapon starts dealing half damage, headshots don't matter whatsoever. If you're doing a wallbang setup with the F1 Lagros on C-Store, for example, just aim for the body. This applies to all weapons. The most common example is when you take an AP-25, the attacker primary, to Kill House. On Kill House, the walls are thin, so the moment you shoot through one wall, you've lost 2 energy. 10 minus 2 is 8, you still have 80% of your energy, you deal full damage through one thin surface. But the moment you shoot through a second thin surface, be it a door or a wall on Kill House, you now lose 2 more energy, dropping you to 6 energy out of 10. That's 60%, so not full damage. This is why on pretty much any map, when you're at a green door and you have a thick pen weapon, like a KR or an AP, you can deal full damage through that door into the enemy. And because you're dealing full damage, you can also headshot, so keep that in mind. So as you can see in the video, and hopefully you've learned by now, that you need to pick your weapon based on the role that you want to fulfill. Don't be afraid to experiment in your own custom games and try the trick I showed you for training mode. And hopefully I'll get around to making an object thickness video because there are a lot of objects in the game, and I wasn't going to fit all of that into this video. Stay tuned.
Oh my god.